Welcome to Bake to the Future. The wholesale baking industry mixes tradition and innovation to feed the world and the economy, generating some major dough while employing nearly 800,000 people in the U.S. We bring you a fresh take on the latest trends and issues impacting the baking sector through exclusive insights and conversations. Brought to you by the American Bakers Association, who will take you bake to the future.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Haley Blumenreich.
And I'm Katie Jewell.
And Katie, new year, new dietary guidelines.
Oh boy.
Very exciting. Today we are diving into the new Dietary Guidelines for Americans. The Dietary Guidelines come out every 5 years and are the cornerstone of all federal nutrition policy and nutrition education guidelines. These guidelines shape consumer health decisions, doctor recommendations, school meal programs, and more.
And why are we talking about this today? Well, that's because the 2025 guidelines, which you might hear us call DGAs, short for Dietary Guidelines for Americans, came out at the end of 2020, and they will make an impact for years to come. I'm certainly looking forward to understanding more, as it's a big deal for the food industry, and it's new to me, and because this is my first time working for an association that's worked on this issue. So I look forward to learning more about it, and I've even helped write stories about it. So I am really looking forward to a deeper dive. And to help us do that, we have 3 guests and experts to help us understand and break it all down. First is Lee Sanders, Senior Vice President of Government Relations and Public Affairs at ABA. Next is Christine Cochran, Executive Director of the Grain Foods Foundation, and then Stacy Krozik, a registered dietitian and President and Principal Consultant of Foodwell Strategies, LLC. All together, ladies, welcome.
Thanks.
Great to be here.
Thanks, Haley.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. And just a little background, the Grain Foods Foundation, sometimes called GFF, was formed in 2004 as a group of thought leaders and advocates for all grain foods, and they believe everyone needs grain foods to enjoy a happy and healthy life. GFF offers research-based information and resources to members, partners, influencers, policymakers, and consumers through a comprehensive communications campaign, conferences, webinars, research tools, social media, and more. And its executive director, Christine, who we have with us today, has led GFF since 2012 and is responsible for the foundation's overall direction, strategy and management, including working with investors, staff, scientific advisory board, and industry partners to develop and implement a public relations plan based on scientific research.
And Stacy Krozik, a strategic food and wellness business builder, partnering with association, organizations, and brands to drive business through leveraging insights and evidence. A fifth-generation farmer, she is a passionate believer that food is more than simply nutrients. It's also a compilation of our celebrations, memories, and culture. So that's a little bit of background. I'm sure we'll hear more about the guests. But first, I have a hardball question for everyone, and I'll call you out by name. The first question, and then Haley will have one. What is your favorite baked good? Now, Lee, we've had you on the show several times. We have not heard from you what your favorite baked good is. What is it?
Well, if it's a sweet good, it's a glazed chocolate donut. And if it's savory, I really love rye bread.
Okay, I like it. All right, a little diversity there. Christine, what about you?
I was going to say I'm a bread girl in any shape or form.
So any, like it doesn't matter if it's whole grains or a nice brioche or just any sort of bread.
I have pairings to make them all work. So no, I can manage whatever is served up.
Okay. And did you become a bread girl after joining forces with GFF, or were you already a bread person?
No, always.
Okay.
Always.
All right. I like it. Stacy, what about you?
So from the sweet angle, I love a good chocolate croissant. And from the savor angle, like Christine, I love all breads. Probably lean towards a good kind of crusty baguette, and then being able to top it off with all of my favorite toppings, whether it's cheese or vegetables. I love all kinds of bread as well.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, thank you for those answers. Haley, your turn.
Well, first I want to say I love how you pronounced croissant, Stacy, because this was actually one of our great bake debates about how people pronounce it here in the States. So, we'll circle back about that later. So our next question is our Great Bake Debate, which this episode is brownies with or without nuts. And this, for listeners who may be new, is a debate that we pose to our guests and to the audience to answer. And you can answer this question yourself at baketothefuture.org/debate. But we'll hear from our guest today. What do you think, Stacey?
I love nuts in general, but I want a brownie that is without them.
Interesting. What about you, Christine?
I'm going to support Stacey, but take an even firmer stance. I do not think nuts are well placed in desserts as a general rule. So.
Oh, now what about pecan pie?
No, absolutely not.
Oh, that sounds like fighting words. Okay, you know what? We're gonna have to.
That's what my husband says.
All right, Lee, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to take a different position. I guess I'm kind of nutty because I like nuts and brownies, especially pecans.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for weaving in a good nut pun as well.
Oh, man. I'm going to have to think about other desserts now with nuts in them, Christine. This is really good to know. It's a fun fact, I guess. All right. Well, thank you for those answers, everybody. And let's pivot very quickly into the actual topic of our conversation today, which is the dietary guidelines. So they just came out. We've been working on them for a while. And we'll kind of talk about the process and everything, but more importantly, we want to talk about what it is and what they mean. So Lee, what are the dietary guidelines and why are they important?
Well, just a little bit of history, Katie. In 1980, USDA published their very first dietary guidelines for Americans, and it was to provide science-based, practical advice for American consumers on what they should be eating. As Haley had mentioned as we started, they are the cornerstone and basis for all federal food and nutrition policy. They played a critical role in federal feeding programs, including the school breakfast and school lunch programs, as well as the SNAP, which is food stamps, and the WIC program, which is a supplement to food stamps for women, infants, and children in need. There's an opportunity every 5 years to provide comments and share emerging science to help inform and refresh this important guidance. And so we've been really strategic in doing that, and we look forward to talking about that more today.
So I know Katie mentioned, we've been working a while, and I think we as an ABA as well as GFF a while on these. So can you walk us through ABA and GFF's involvement in the dietary guidelines?
Yeah. So about 3 cycles ago, it's hard to believe it's about 15 years ago, ABA established the grain chain. So it's an all-inclusive farm-to-table grain industry coalition. It makes up of 11 different grain organizations, from the wheat growers, millers, bakers, Grain Foods Foundation, Wheat Foods Council, Rice, Independent Bakers, AIB, pasta associations. And so this group worked to review and develop unified consensus comments and positions. And so this has been a great way for us to review and go through the process and then have a unified approach for the entire sector. ABA has worked in partnership with the Grain Foods Foundation, in particular, in leading the group and gaining insight and perspective from GFF's terrific expert scientific advisory board on the science and the latest research that supports and bolsters the nutritional benefits of grain foods in the diet. Every cycle we have built on our previous success, and in 2020 there's no exception. We're always raising the bar on our response and our resources for our members and investors, and for influencers. This year, the special grain chain project included GFF's expertise to craft a classic public relations plan and framework that included a customizable member toolkit to help them promote and educate around the new guidelines, and proactive outreach to media outlets. We've had some terrific pickup already on our press release and messaging. And there's been, we're working on influencer outreach, and that strategy has been great. And we're looking at that in both English and Spanish. We also, this time, have a new website, gograins.org. And so that is going to be another terrific resource for nutrition influencers, for our members, for the public. There's great information, infographics, easy to understand information. And so once again, we have just expanded the way we can do outreach and educate on the goodness of grains and the nutritional benefits that we offer.
Thanks for that, Lee. I didn't realize that the DGAs were only 40 years old. I think that's interesting. Turning to Christine, I'm wondering, so when we say that this is the framework for federal food policies and school meals and all of these things, what are some of the what are some other ways that maybe consumers kind of see the dietary guidelines in action in their daily lives?
So when you think about it from the consumer perspective versus like institutional buyers, they really see these dietary guidelines come to life for them in a couple of ways. One is in a clinical setting, right? So registered dietitians, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, they really rely on this kind of information to guide their recommendations. Now, obviously, if someone has a chronic condition, they're taking this information and overlaying medical advice on top of it. So you'll see variations off of it, but it really forms the foundation from which that nutritional guidance emerges. And then in terms of family life, it's school meals. As Lee was talking about, the school meals is a nationwide program that makes its purchasing and serving decisions based on these guidelines. And so for a lot of school-age children in America, these dietary guidelines certainly guide their lunch, but often their breakfast and their after-school snack as well.
And a lot of our members ABA's members are baking companies and in the supply chain of the baking industry. So how would they see these, the dietary guidelines impact their business? Maybe Lee, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Well, grain foods are an important contributor of essential nutrients and vitamins in the American's diet. And so certainly the new guidance and how that may change, this time it's been pretty constant with the last couple of sets of recommendations. But I think it always drives new innovation and new interest to see, what consumers are looking for. One of the things that was really exciting about 2020 is that for the first time, whole grains were deemed as one of the 3 essential food groups to be on the plate. And so, and for every life stage. And so I think that, that really provides some really exciting, energizing innovation opportunities for our sector.
What were the other 2?
Fruits and vegetables.
All right. So fruits, vegetables, and grains. And I think that, maybe let's get a little bit more specific into what this round of dietary guidelines recommended. And that was 6 servings of grains, half of which should be whole grains. And Stacy, let's talk a little bit about what some of these new opportunities could bring, and like your comments about how grain consumption could, the increase in grain consumption could be helpful in whole grains. And also let's talk a little bit about enriched grains.
Sure. Grains, we know that they serve as a cornerstone of a healthful plant-based diet in all cultures. They're versatile, they're affordable, they're delicious. What we do know is that grains are usually paired with some other nutrient-dense offering like fruits or vegetables, low-fat protein, and dairy. They're foundational partner foods, from sandwiches, casseroles, cereal, fruit and milk, pasta and sauce. These are great ways to help increase that nutrient density to really make every bite count. And we know that this both whole and enriched grains play a really impactful role in diet quality through providing, as Lee said, key essential and shortfall nutrients.
That's not terms that we usually use in like everyday conversation. So what do those actually mean?
So the dietary guidelines identified several nutrients that are at a shortfall for most Americans. And maybe I'll back up just one bit in the fact that even though the dietary guidelines didn't really change that much from the last iteration, one significant change was that these are dietary guidelines for all Americans. So now we have dietary guidelines from birth to 2 years of age, which we did not have before, as well as pregnant and breastfeeding women. And so when you include all life stages as a part of this, there are different shortfall nutrients in each one of those categories of people that they're just not getting enough of. And so that's why we have iron fortified infant cereal, because we know that iron is a nutrient that's hard to get in children. For pregnant women, we know folic acid and folate, it's an essential nutrient to prevent neural tube defects. And so, that's why we enrich and that's why we fortify, so that we can provide some of these nutrients that are missing in the diets of Americans.
And I think I would love to learn too about how the communication side of the dietary guidelines, what is going on there, and how ABA and GFF as MyPlate strategic partners create more involvement. Maybe Christine, you can take that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So the communication strategy that the grain chain has developed, as Lee said, it's been built over cycles, is to develop toolkits for each of the associations to be able to use and to customize to their messaging and their goals and objectives, but also to develop materials that influencers can use across their various platforms. The idea is to, over the next several weeks, proactively pitch to the media our positions and our resources, which doesn't just include things like infographics and messages, but also our expertise, right? So the scientific advisory board and others associated with that can talk about it. And then between all of the organizations, we also have a bevy of folks who are very focused on developing recipes and meal plans to make all of it very actionable. And so that too also sort of helps provide people with the information that they're seeking. And I generally call them the tweaks, right? We're at this time of the year where people are thinking about their diet more. And yes, some people are making radical changes, but a lot of people are just like, how do I get, a few more fruits and vegetables into my diet? And one of the great things about being in the grains industry is we get to raise our hand and say we can help, because more fruits and vegetables are often accompanied with more grains. And so what we see is it's a lot easier to put lettuce and tomato on that sandwich you already love, right, than try and reinvent your lunch.
The other thing that I would add there is national strategic partners beyond the dietary guidelines. There's also the MyPlate, and so that really complement the dietary guidelines. And so a lot of the members of the grain chain are national strategic partners of the MyPlate. Certainly, Grain Foods Foundation is, Wheat Foods Council is, and ABA is as well. And so, that provides opportunities for us to partner with USDA on new communications, new opportunities. In the past, we did a series of videos. And so we've already had some initial discussions with USDA about coming in and talking about, new opportunities, and also sharing, there's been some terrific research during this last cycle that the Grain Foods Foundation had been driving. And so there's going to be wonderful opportunities to educate the new staff as they come into USDA under the new administration about the value of the grain chain and what we have to offer.
Lee, could you share with us who else can be a My Plate strategic partner and what that looks like?
Sure, Haley. Yeah, it's a great opportunity. It's not only trade organizations, but also companies can join as national strategic partners. And so you do apply. You have to demonstrate that you have promoted the dietary guidelines and provide some collateral to show how you've messaged and how you've done that outreach. And it is a great opportunity to work together within the sector, but then also across sectors. So if you think about focusing on meals, looking at eating occasions, there are opportunities where, for example, you might be talking about breakfast. And so that's a great opportunity to talk about toast and to talk about cereal and milk and fruit that you might put on your cereal. So there's been great collaboration among the different food sectors. They also have rolled out just recently some great new online tools. They have a new app for the 2020 guidelines that is personalized. And so you can go in and they encourage you to take a survey so that you'll get information that's personalized to the kind of information that you're looking for. So it's a great opportunity for organizations and for companies. So I would highly encourage our members to consider that.
Thanks, Lee. And we're talking a lot about communication right now. And in some of the communication that we've put out, both as ABA and the Grain Chain in our first press release, we said in there that there was some language that was troubling for our industry that we weren't wild about. Stacy, can you talk to us a little bit about what that language is, what it means, what it could mean to us?
Sure. Because the Dietary Guidelines for Americans focuses on whole grains, and even though they say make half your grains whole, they really don't give any clarity or educational opportunities to understand what the remaining grains should look like in our diets. And in fact, they have negative language saying we should reduce the amount of refined grains that we eat each day. And so there seems to be, kind of let's throw everything that's not a whole grain or 100% whole grain into this bucket called refined grains. And then they're negative about you should consume, fewer refined grains in your diet. And, we're concerned, from the perspective as a practitioner, that when you negate, an entire, kind of value of these enriched staple grains in our diet, you equate them, and with more foods that are sometimes foods that we enjoy as an indulgence in our daily life. And so we want to make sure that people understand that enriched refined grains are a fantastic opportunity to include as a part of the other half of the grain recommendation.
And I think that you've talked about too, we want to stay away from like good foods, bad foods, and all of that. And I think that we've discussed before talking about enriched grains and some of those like indulgent foods, that's not the same as enriched grains. I get that. But like, even these indulgent foods, so, maybe our pecan pie, Christine, there's a place for that, right? And so talk to me about that as like a dietitian and kind of how that kind of plays in to dietary guidelines.
So as you mentioned in my bio, I truly believe that food is more than nutrients. It's about our culture, it's our heritage, our memories, and our celebrations. Every culture in the world has food as a part of their celebration. And so these celebration foods oftentimes are more indulgent, right? We have them as special occasions, or, it's a simple moment of joy in our day of like, I'm just needing a brownie today, and want to enjoy it in this moment today. And so when we look at dietary patterns across the history, people know that when we have restrictive diets, that we tend to then, want to focus on those foods that are forbidden, so to speak. Or, a lot of times when folks are on these trendy diets, now they have their cheat days. And, rather than having something that's not sustainable, it's really important to have just a healthy dietary pattern that includes indulgent foods as a part of that, as a part of those what used to be called discretionary calories. Now they're just kind of built in as the overall dietary pattern. Because again, that was another change about these dietary guidelines, is that they're focused on meal patterns and less about solely specific foods.
And I want to expand on what you were just talking about with like kind of like these more extreme diets, or kind of, these, in our situation, and it's considered like adversarial to our industry. So like paleo and keto and all of these. So Christine, maybe can you just talk about like how that affects, kind of those mindsets and those, food tribes, kind of what did they do, these groups, around this dietary guidelines cycle and the process? And can you just kind of help me understand what these perspectives are and what they mean?
Yeah, of course. I think it's a great question. And I liked your use of the word food tribe, or phrase food tribe, because that's really what they are becoming. I mean, the one thing I would caution, though, is that we can paint them with the brush of low carb, but they are very distinct, and people come and go from these tribes. One of the things we know about them is like people don't tend to stay for a long time in them, although at any given time their size is relatively stable. So that being said, you do have what we're seeing right now at this moment in time is sort of two camps. You have the classic low carb mindset, and that can be characterized by a keto diet, a paleo diet, even going back to like South Beach and some of the others. Those are still alive and well and out there and being marketed. So you have those, but you also have a similar kind of low carb spirited diet that is low glycemic. And the phrase that we're seeing right now being used is slow carb, fast carb distinctions. But that's really, it's paired up with the glycemic index. And so generally speaking, what we see in there is an idea that you remove carbohydrates from your diet and you will lose weight. And they have a variety of other benefits that are often marketed with it. And, the reality of it is, if we all cut 500 calories out of our diet, we too would probably lose some weight over time as well. It's just which calories do you choose to cut. Oftentimes these diets are very appealing because of the simplicity. It's very clear cut what you can and what you cannot eat, and helps you navigate what can be a sticky world sometimes when it comes to nutrition. But in terms of the dietary guidelines, what we see is just the voice becoming stronger and stronger. And maybe Lee has a slightly different perspective, but my sense of it was, they built on their scientific library over, between the last cycle and this cycle, but it still was not sufficient. And so we did not see the dietary guidelines embrace their recommendations. But they're there and they're committed to that effort. And I think one of the things we have to realize is that this is a voice that's been there. You can go back to USDA data identifying low carb diets during World War II. So it is a story that has been told for a very long time in the nutrition space. But we've got a great positive story to tell, and I think that's one of the things that distinguishes us. On that plate is like there's so much positive in the grain space, which Stacy and Lee have already talked about: the nutrient density, the pairing with fruits and vegetables, just from a healthy eating perspective, there's a lot of positive things to think about and consider when evaluating grains.
So Lee, could you share with us what opportunities you see for the baking industry and for ABA members after the new dietary guidelines have come out?
I see great opportunities for not only ABA, but for all the grain chain members. Certainly grains are positioned very well in the new guidelines. I think the fact that there was a constant or consistency from the last set of guidelines speaks well for us. The science is there. And there's new emerging science that we now can also share that is new for consumers. And so they're great opportunities messaging to the public, messaging to health influencers, and then also to policy influencers. Certainly with a new Congress, with a new president and new administration, there are opportunities to build new relationships and to educate. And ABA and the Grain Chain are a great vehicle to do that.
Right now, we are sitting in 2021. The next guidelines will come out in 2025. Christine, and are we already starting to think about what happens 5 years from now?
Yes, absolutely. I think of the dietary guidelines as eternal. So yes, they're done every 5 years, but the work is ongoing. And so one of the things that we always do coming out of the dietary guidelines reports that just came out at the end of the year is to review and analyze them, and specifically for research, really understanding, what were identified by the DGAC as our category's weaknesses, and how can GFF invest in research that will bolster those areas. And so that's the process we are currently engaged in, is reaching out to our scientific advisory board, assembling them, and walking through kind of what they view as that list. We will compare it to the list that we have developed internally, and then work to identify ways to fill in the gaps.
And Stacy, do you see anything kind of standing out for you that could be added to that list as it's a significant document, everyone. If you haven't had a chance to review it, it's available online and you can see it. It's linked very quickly through gograins.org. But Stacy, is there anything that's jumping out to you as far as like what could happen in the next 5 years with research?
Yeah, I'm really interested in finding out more the contributions of the lack of fruits and vegetables to the lower healthy eating index score has, because again, refined grains continues to have almost a negative connotation in the language used in the dietary guidelines. However, if you look at the data, I think the contributions of enriched staple grains to that healthy eating index really are significant. I mean, we have data that, in the past that we've used in our comments and the opportunities to help educate that, enriched and fortified grains really do provide significant contributions along with whole grains to the overall diet quality. And so I think really looking at fruits and vegetables and that is the opportunity of how we can improve our diet quality even more is by increasing numbers of fruits and vegetables. And, what a great way to do that is pairing them with the whole and enriched staple grains.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Thank you, Christine and Lee, for sharing your insights and your expertise on this topic. I certainly learned a lot, and I want to let our listeners know that they can go to gograins.org to learn more about the Grain Chain's work on the dietary guidelines and find more communications tools. And you can go to baketothefuture.org/debate to answer our great bake debate about brownies. And I'm interested to find out how that's going to land. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that's Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, or Ghana.
Bake to the Future is brought to you by the American Bakers Association in partnership with Human Factor. To hear upcoming and past episodes, go to baketothefuture.org. Bake to the Future is produced by Haley Blumenreich. Audio engineer is Blake Alton. And A Slice of the Action is written by the American Bakers Association's Government Relations Team.